Today we have some potential trade, free agent, and roster move rumors involving the Winnipeg Jets, the Washington Capitals, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Boston Bruins. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. First of all, I want to get started with a quick hit here on a new signing. Patrick Maroon finally has a contract for the coming season, and he's going to have a new home yet again, signing a one-year contract with the Tampa Bay Lightning for $900K. Of course, Patrick Maroon's from St. Louis, was a hometown hero with the Blues, went on to win a Stanley Cup. Even though he only got to play there 1 year, I'm sure it was an awesome experience for him. Unfortunately, the Blues could not make room for him on the roster to bring him back. I do believe there was interest, but they didn't want to box out any of their younger players. And seeing guys like Sammy Blais and Sanford, and you still got guys like Klim Kostin, Jordan Kyrou in the minors. They want to make sure that they can make room for these guys and give them bigger roles for the future as well. So unfortunately, it meant cutting ties with Maroon, and of course now he's signed a one-year deal with Tampa. Now there's a lot of familiarity between him and head coach John Cooper. John Cooper did coach him during their junior days, and I'm sure that likely did play a role in this signing. Now of course Tampa recently traded Adam Ernie. Now they bring in Patrick Maroon, who's obviously a big body, a lot of experience, won a Stanley Cup last year. The Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, have been a team that's been pegged to win a cup now for some time, but haven't gotten it done, and maybe Maroon might be that missing ingredient. With the elements he brings, like the size and physicality, etc., maybe that'll help them get over the hump here. So either way, I do think this is a good signing for Tampa. It's a fairly cheap contract, 1 year, low risk, and very well, like I said, might provide that missing ingredient that they don't already have. Now let's jump over and take a look at some free news amongst some free agents and some pending free agents. First, I want to start with the Washington Capitals. Now they have a couple of big names on their roster who are entering the final year of their contract, and that's goaltender Braden Holtby and center iceman Nicholas Backstrom. Now we've touched on these players before, not really sure how the Capitals are going to proceed, but there was some comments recently from GM Brian McClellan indicating that he intends to sit down with both these players likely sometime early in September, probably around the time that training camp opens, have some initial dialogue, let them know what they're thinking from the Capital side of things, and kind of see where it goes. Now, based on their cap situation, it might be very difficult for them to bring both players back. It's not really clear how they're going to handle this. I mean, I don't know if we'd really see either of them be traded. Of course, they both play big roles with the club, and especially now where we don't know what's going to happen with Evgeny Kuznetsov, who's been suspended by the IIHF for 4 years and has a hearing coming up here with Gary Bettman. We don't know how that's going to be handled yet. He might find himself out of NHL action for some time while he deals with his substance abuse issues. So obviously that could have a big impact on the Capitals. So I don't see either of these guys being traded, but it's debatable whether or not they both remain with the Capitals beyond the coming season. I think out of the two, I bet more likely that Backstrom would be the more likely one to return. He even said himself, because he was also asked about the possibility, and he said that Washington's all he knows since he's come over to play in the NHL, and he'd like to extend for a few more years and extend his stay there. So I can see them maybe working out a shorter term contract with Backstrom for a reasonable amount that works for their cap situation. But with all the explosion we've seen in goaltending contracts like Bobrovsky and Vasilevsky, etc., I can see Braden Holtby, who's really right up there when it comes to those types of statistics, looking for much bigger money and kind of pricing himself out of Washington. But I guess we will see long term how this plays out, but do expect talks to resume with these two players on extensions early around training camp, and we'll see if they can work something out. But I do think it's doubtful that both of them return beyond the coming year. Now jumping over to take a quick look at the Edmonton Oilers. Now we talked about the possibility yesterday of them trading Jesse Puljujarvi maybe to a team like the Penguins, and maybe that could bring them to number 3 center they're looking for, perhaps in a player like Nick Bjugstad. But there's also another possibility that they could go after a free agent if they can't find a trade for Puljujarvi to satisfy that need of their roster, that maybe they'd go down the road of going after a guy like Riley Sheahan. Of course, Ken Holland will be familiar with him from their days in Detroit. Sheahan's proven to be a decent number 3, number 4 center during his time. He can play PK. He's okay on faceoffs, so he could service that role maybe on a 1 year short-term contract. It wouldn't cost very much to bring him in. Probably $900K, maybe $1 million, etc. I think that's certainly a possibility they could go down. I know Kurt Levins of the Edmonton Journal that covers the Oilers expressed that in one of his latest articles, indicating that Sheahan very well could be a decent fit, and I do agree it's a possibility. I think they could use somebody a little stronger myself, but if all else fails, if they can't make a trade and there's not really much else on the market that's going to really fit within their budget to really be anything better. So I do think there's a possibility after losing out on Derek Brassard that the Edmonton Oilers perhaps go after Riley Sheahan as the next option for that number 3 center role. Now, the Boston Bruins might be in tough with their blue line by the time the season rolls around. Of course, they have RFA defensemen Charlie McAvoy and Brandon Carlo that are not signed. And right now, we don't really have a clear-cut indication that things are really progressing in the right direction, that anything's imminent. So we don't really know how that's going to go. But I do think once the calendar turns to September, once we get training camp underway, things are likely going to heat up on many of these RFA negotiations. And we likely will see at least a big chunk of them, I would think, come to terms either during camp or in the first days of the season or something to get most of them playing. But we do think there's a pretty decent possibility that there could be some end up sitting out and missing some time. And for the Bruins' sake, I really hope that it's not McAvoy and Carlo, because that blue line is going to be really depleted, because we now have other news saying that defenseman John Moore likely isn't going to be ready to start the season. He had shoulder surgery, and same thing with Kevin Miller, who battled injuries a lot last year, may not be ready either. So those two D could end up on long-term injury reserve, which at the same time does give the Bruins some cap flexibility. And of course, having McAvoy and Carlo unsigned gives them flexibility to an extent, but at the same time, they do need to get these guys under contract, and it's going to be that much more urgency that the blue line is going to really be hurting if all four of those guys are not there on opening night. So I guess we'll see. I mean, obviously the Bruins do have Alex Petrovic on a professional tryout. That very well could lead to him maybe being signed to a short-term contract, and maybe we'll see them make some other additional moves to maybe bring in some other guys. I really don't know, but I do think the Bruins are a key team to watch, regardless when it comes to either making a trade to bring in another defenseman, or possibly maybe working hard to get these guys under contract, which I know they'd be doing anyways. But it's going to be that much more important because of that depleted blue line. So I guess we'll see how the Bruins handle this and what the blue line actually looks like on opening night. Now, next up here, I want to touch on the Winnipeg Jets. Now, of course, we know they have some big-time RFA forwards, and Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor still remain unsigned. We've seen numerous comments now from Laine over the offseason that really indicate that it's really hard to say where things are going, and that a return to Winnipeg, I think, is anything but a guarantee at this point. Now, Sportsnet host Jeff Merrick was recently on Sportsnet 590 and made some interesting comments that I thought we would share here today and see what everybody thinks. He indicated that the leadership group within the Jets really drives the team hard and really runs a tight ship, and that when players are not living up to those expectations, that they kind of fall out of favor. Now, it's no surprise that guys like Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele work extremely hard every game, every shift, and are definitely leaders on that team. And their leadership certainly does drive the bulk of that group, along with a guy like a Dustin Byfuglien, for example. I mean, we've seen different cases throughout last year. I can think of a couple cases right off with Byfuglien yelling at Laine on the ice to move his feet. I know there's been a few times that Laine's kind of been accused of being a little bit on the lazy side, not working hard enough defensively, and really just not putting in the effort that they expect, I guess, from the young Finnish winger. So I do think the possibility does exist that there could be some tension between Laine and the Jets, whether it be with his teammates or even with the coaching staff and management as well. As much as they know he has raw talent, he can score goals, but it doesn't mean you don't have to work hard. I mean, nowadays, players do have to play more of a responsible 200-foot game and really push the effort here, night in and night out, shift in and shift out. And when that's not happening, the veteran players and the coaching staff are certainly not going to be, overly enamored with that, and thus give you a hard time to work on your improvement. So I do think Patrick Laine is a goal-scoring machine. I think he probably will be for a long time, but I do think he still has some maturing and growing up to do by the looks of things, and he could certainly work to improve his overall game on the ice. And we'll see here if this relationship is actually fractured to the point that they will consider trading him. We've heard numerous rumors throughout the offseason about an offer sheet or a trade. We've yet to see either one of those happen, but I do think that it's possible that as we get closer to training camp, that possibility of an offer sheet does exist and likely will increase. Now, I'm not going to go on record to say that I think for sure that we're going to see another offer sheet this summer, but I think for right now, over the next couple of weeks before training camp happens, I don't think it's likely at all. But once we get to that point and you see the players that are unsigned still, I think as each passing day goes by, the possibility is going to increase that we do see one. But the only problem is right now there's just not a lot of teams that have that capability. A lot of teams around the NHL have used up their roster spots, have used up a lot of their salary cap space, and it just would prove to be a little bit more challenging than it was earlier, around July 1st, when teams had way more flexibility before they spent a lot of the money on other contracts. But either way, watch the Jets. I do think there's a possibility that Laine very well could end up being traded. You just never know. I don't really think they want that. I think ultimately the players and management would like to see Patrick Laine make some improvements and adjust his game to work a little harder. That's probably what they would prefer. I mean, he was drafted where he was for a reason. And at the same time, though, I think he'd like more opportunity to play on the top line, which he was given some opportunity before, but just never really gelled with Scheifele and Wheeler. Because one of the comments he did make earlier this summer was that he wanted to play with the top talent and that he'd like to have more of an opportunity. And he thinks he could prove himself to be an even stronger goal scorer if that were to happen. But at the same time, he has to earn that opportunity by working hard, which is something that we haven't seen night in and night out. So let me know what you think. Is there a possibility that the Winnipeg Jets and Patrick Laine have a fractured relationship that which could result in a trade? Or do you think that Laine can make the necessary adjustments to get back into good favor here with his teammates and coaching staff and continue building on a solid career that he's already started some strong foundations on in his first few years in the NHL? So that is all for today. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.